Now, we're going to be moving on to our panel, and there's some very interesting speakers here today, and I'm sure we'll hear so much more. We've started the conversation through the speakers of this morning. The panel will take it that much further. So I'm firstly going to introduce our moderator for today in this data leadership panel, David Brimstaller. Lovely to see you, David. David and I have worked together for many years, so it's great to see you. David is a principal industry consultant for government at SAS. He will now be joined with and other panelists. David, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah,
or would
we'll
I?
do, Samantha. That's
okay,
great. Thank you
I'll
very
hand
much.
to you then.
Thank you kindly. Thank you for a great session as well.
Pleasure.
Hello and welcome. This is our keynote panel discussion on how having an active Chief Data Officer helps to benefit our organisations and shape the way we use data and analysis for benefit, and what policy is essential in starting the conversation. So first I'd like to welcome not only yourselves but the panellists themselves. As Pamantri mentioned, I'm the Principal Industry Consultant for SAS, and I have the pleasure of working with a lot of these C-level executives, and today we're going to have a chance to talk with these key leaders in our industry to understand some of the things that they can help us take back to our organisations and drive change for the better. So first I'd like to welcome Emma Chippendale. Emma is an accomplished data professional with data analytics roles across various sectors. Emma's also the current Chief Data Officer at the Department of Regional New South Wales, where she helps spearhead initiatives to advance the cause of regional New South Wales as a state. Welcome, Emma. Please join me on the stage. Please, a round of applause. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Paul Robards. He's the Chief Data Integration Officer at the Department of Defence, and he obviously has a key role in helping the organisation bring together, with a wealth of expertise behind him, the data assets of the organisation for change and improvement. He has over 30 years' experience in the military as well, so lots of experience to share with us there as well. And I'd also like to welcome Jenny Humphreys. Jenny's a very experienced professional with over 25 years' experience in the industry, currently working as the Chief Data Officer for the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations. Jenny has done some crucial work in economic statistics, including the work that she did on during the COVID-19 pandemic, and her work on single-touch payroll and other initiatives have helped us really understand the impact of COVID and how we can best not only respond to it but to recover from it. So thank you, Jenny, for your work with that. And last but not least, Ray Greenwood. Ray's the Director of Customer Advisory Services at SAS. He has over 2 decades' experience across financial services, retail, government, telecommunications, and is a proponent of innovation and how we can use innovation to help both drive data, but data to drive innovation back into our organisation. So welcome, Ray. Welcome to our panel. So let's get started with the panel discussion, but I'll just make note of the questions. We'll take questions at the end of the session. So for those that want to ask, please put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you as quick as we can. But in the meantime, we might kick off with Jenny. Jenny, you've recently taken up a role as a Chief Data Officer at the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations. It's obviously a critical department. It's a new role at that department as well, and I think you're about 4 months in. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience of being a CDO, bringing your expertise to the table and starting up that new role in the organisation. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm really proud to be Jua's first Chief Data Officer. It's actually presented a lot of opportunities for me, and it's presented a lot of opportunities for the department. So I was lucky to come in with no sort of predefined resources or responsibilities. I got to come in and actually talk to a lot of people and find out what the organisation needed. They'd gone to the effort of recruiting a Chief Data Officer, so what was it that they actually needed? I had, in my first 100 days, more coffee than I've had in my entire past 12 months. But there's a reason for that. You know, we can do the formal meetings, but it's those informal meetings where you actually get to the heart of the issue. Why do you need a Chief Data Officer? What do you actually want changed? I met with a lot of CDOs from across government, and that really helped give some insights to some of those emerging whole of government initiatives that maybe DUA wasn't quite as tapped into as we could have been. So in the first 100 days, we have prepared a data strategy, and I'm really proud to say next week it'll be formally launched. You know, the data strategy certainly sets where we want to head. In the first 100 days, we've actually prepared a draft data governance framework. So that's going to outline how we're going to get there. It's going to outline the policies, the foundations that we need. It also outlines the governance that we're going to put in place so we know that we're, using data appropriately. When it comes to the data organisational model, because I was new, I had a lot of, ability to shape how we're going to structure the data organisational model. And we ended up putting in place what we called the data hub and spoke model. So where the CDO branch is at the hub, where it will set the standards and the policies and the guidelines, but recognised each of the data teams out there in business and digital and legal. They all have a really critical role to play, and we're only as strong as our weakest spoke. So we see my role as actually helping them become stronger, so we're a stronger wheel. The final thing that we did in the first 100 days is actually start working with the ONDC on our data asset inventory work, and that was really critical to understand where our data holdings are. My next 100 days, I think I'm going to be a disruptor.
We might talk a little bit more about that next. Thank you, Jenny. That's excellent. Some great milestones achieved in such a short order of time, but focus, I think, is everything, isn't it? Emma, we might move to you now to talk a little bit about the journey that you've been on. So you're a bit further down the track. You've been in the role for 2 years, and it might be a little bit insightful for the audience to find out about your 2-year journey and transforming the department's data practices and policies and some of the things maybe Jenny was talking about, and that idea of maybe being a bit of a challenger and a disruptor as well in a positive way.
Thank you. And Jenny, I'm in awe that you managed to do all of that in 100 days. So I've been in the role for about 2.5 years, and we have also developed a data strategy and a data governance framework, and we're working on a data catalogue. But maybe the thing I'll talk about is the data culture that we're trying to work on developing. So one aspect of that is when we developed the data strategy, it was a co-design process. So Department of Regional New South Wales is a very, very diverse organisation that covers everything from primary industries, local land services, mining, exploration, regional development, and has, I'm going to say, enormously diverse and still fragmented data sets across the organisation. So when we developed the data strategy, we needed to first of all think about where is the maturity of each of those parts of the organisation, and then what is an appropriate strategy given that we have all of those differing levels of maturity. So that co-design process meant that we were able to kind of bring people along and have them a bit more invested in the benefits of the data strategy. Another element then, so when we did our maturity assessment a few years ago now, we're about to do our next one, we discovered that data governance overall had the lowest maturity across the board. And that's not really surprising, because if nobody's ever really been asked to think about data governance, how on earth would they have a high level of maturity in data governance? So then we, again, have developed a data governance framework, again, co-designed and with proof of concept teams. So thinking about for their own data sets, their own data operating model, will this data governance framework work for them? So really testing it out as we build it, and now we've had that endorsed. It's been, we've got partnerships with our cyber people. Thank goodness I'm not responsible for cyber security. We've got partnerships with cyber, with records management, with information and privacy management, all of those different pieces of the puzzle that have to come together for a data governance framework. In terms of the data culture, something I really enjoy is we have our data community of practice called Data at Regional. We've been going for about 2 years. We meet monthly. And something that I'm very aware of is that a lot of the time you might have 1 or 2 people within a team who are the data people, and they don't have those connections with other data people who might be doing really similar work in a really different part of the organisation. So bringing that community of practice together builds some of those connections, elevates the visibility of data across the organisation, and helps those people sort of see that they're part of a whole community of data professionals within the organisation. Look, my own self-imposed KPIs that I really would like it if we get to a point of data culture where people across the organisation are automatically saying, how can we add data into this policy, program, decision, instead of it being, oh, the data team said we should do X, Y, Z. So when we get to that point where people are coming to us and saying, how do I add that data layer in? That's when I think we'll really have, made real changes in our data culture.
Fantastic, Emma. They're great insights into culture, people and change over time. Paul, we might move to you for a moment and talk a little bit about your organisation, some of the significant advances in the way you're using data, governing it, managing it, and trying to integrate it, which is part of your title as well. So, Paul, any thoughts, insights to share with the audience about the journey you've been on and some of the things you're doing?
Thanks, David. Look, it's a tough gig. We've got 100,000 people and functions that range from corporate through to high-end warfighting. And when you've got that sort of size, complexity, and spectrum, the data challenges are also large and complex for us there as well. If I give a little bit of context about the Defence Strategic Review that was released last year, it calls for a much more integrated force. An integrated force requires us to be integrated and interoperable with our data across our platforms and right across the organisation there. And that's a real challenge for us. Defence Strategic Review also directs us to achieve asymmetric advantage. Now, we'll achieve that through a variety of things relevant to this discussion. AI has been mentioned quite a number of times here already. We've got to get the data right in order to bring that asymmetric advantage through AI. And we've got to have trusted data there that the organisation can use. Excuse me. So some of the things that we've been doing to enable this, we've introduced data custodians across the organisation. Now, we've moved quickly. We can't wait for perfection and allow perfection to get in the way of us getting out there and delivering good things quickly. So we've put in place data custodians, and those are people across the organisation that I rely on to support me in bringing together the trusted quality data that we need and helping to govern that across the organisation here. Now, we've heard before already about federated models, hub and spoke type models, that sort of thing. That is very much what we're doing in defence. Now, to do that, we've initially gone for an approach where we are using data custodians that are aligned to our organisational structure. In time, we're likely to move that towards something that'll be more a domain-based data custodian approach. But as I said, we don't want to let perfection get in the way of good, and so we've moved quickly, done what we can quickly, and then we move on with this. Data sharing agreements. In previous presentation there was discussion about data sharing agreements. This is something that we've had to provide some focus on. We are an organisation that has traditionally come from a need to know sort of mantra, almost asking a question, why do you need to know this? It is from a security perspective. We're flipping that somewhat. We've still got to make sure that we're maintaining our security in these things, but we're talking about there's a need to share these things. And by sharing, we create more value for the organisation. And so through our data sharing agreements, we're looking for a new approach where we can move quickly and get data to the people that need it when they need it as quickly as possible. The policy is seeking to give those business units and the domains across the organisation the autonomy that they need to operate, but with the central guidance, the guardrails, so that we can ensure that we have integrated, interoperable data for our integrated platforms that we're using across defence. We've got to do so quickly. But you can't govern by policy. You can't put policy out and expect that that's going to change the organisation. So the change management and the communications and the culture is what we're talking about here, becomes so critical in this. I need people to see that this is what value we can bring by all of this. We're not just talking about some sort of dashboards or reports. If we look at sporting organisations who are using data to win, organisations that are using data to make better profits, then we too need to be looking at what is the vast potential of data that we've got there. And we're bringing together an enterprise data platform that we can use this, and we're bringing that together with our data strategy to make sure that across defence we can achieve what we're calling decision advantage, which is the ability to make better decisions faster.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul. A lot to unpack there, a lot of complexity, building culture, making change. It's a nice segue into this question for you, Ray. About 20 years in the industry, seen a lot of organisations grapple with data governance and enacting the changes that some of the panellists have shared with us. What are some of your thoughts about how you make it positive and you take the right steps and couple innovation with responsibility and those sorts of things?
Thanks, David. It was a perfect segue there, thank you, from Paul. I'm going to call it a segue rather than, damn, he said exactly what I was thinking. And we'll pretend that was well segue planned. However, it won't surprise anyone that at a data summit and sitting next to 3 people with lived experience as CDOs, the pragmatic steps that could draw out the positives in a data strategy and governance framework are exactly the things that thematically have been touched on both already on this panel or by previous presentations as well. But perhaps by calling them out for special attention, there are probably 3 key areas that I would see. The first being exactly what Paul left his point on with cultural change and identifying the value associated with data strategy and governance framework. I have a slight marketing background and I feel like governance overall probably has a brand and image problem more than anything else. I wish I could go back in time by about 10 years and it'll need a far more pithy tagline than this, but rebrand data governance as being, this is the means by which we're going to get smarter, more accurate, faster decisions out and make you all look great within your organisation and outside. If someone can just chat GPT that for me and give me back the 3-word version, fantastic. Put it on the mouse pads. Well, gosh, everyone's got all the good ideas I was going to talk about. So to that cultural point, the pragmatic step that we can drive there that perhaps is under-leveraged is a proper campaign, an internal marketing initiative around getting adoption and buy-in to whatever agenda the CDO is setting out. There will be a grand vision. The people are there, they can establish it. This is a role that is understood enough that we've got the right folks in those positions to draft up that vision. But as Jenny was saying, now you've got to drive out and get that cultural change and the buy-in from the grassroots to make sure it actually gets adopted, and perhaps that pithy tagline will help and put it on a mouse pad. That'll be exactly the right way to go. Secondly, data literacy, I think, is a double bubble effect in terms of practical ways that we can get everyone to buy in. Double bubble meaning, obviously, as the data improves, people start to use it more because they're getting better, more defensible, transparent decisions out. So that's a positive. They will start using that information more and their data literacy will rise. And as that tide rises, all of those folks who are investing in data literacy start to observe the benefits of a solid data strategy and governance framework. They buy in naturally because it's helping them do exactly what my non-pithy version of the tagline did, which means they invest more in it and start using the data more, which uplifts their data literacy, and round we go. So investment in skills and enablement around data literacy has that double bubble that we can look forward to, and that virtuous cycle that will start being created. And then finally, I wouldn't work where I do work with David at SAS. I do believe there is a role as these data strategies and governance frameworks are revitalised or drawn out in organisations. There's probably, I would like to think, a role for tools and technology to play in that, but the pragmatic aspect has to be, again, around the enablement and the skills uplift around the use of those tools, not just by the direct users, but perhaps by those who are impacted by those tools, again, to get that buy-in, because otherwise we're at risk of creating an ivory tower of a perfect technical framework that doesn't necessarily get engaged with by the organisation. So there's a need to get that general enablement across the board as well. Probably my parting thought around the pragmatics would be that one of the interesting debates is how far does the remit of a CDO go? It's kind of hard to identify where does that purview start and stop in an organisation. You could argue it goes as far as the data goes, which could be everywhere, or you could argue maybe it needs more control. I'm sure that the truth will be somewhere in the middle. But pragmatically defining, okay, how far do I need to drive buy-in to that vision? And then getting that out there as I say, an internal marketing campaign with the appropriate change management and transformation management around it will certainly help accelerate that process.
Thank you, Ray. Some great insights there. And you know, it's all about making it practical and usable and something you can implement for benefit. I wanted to touch on that with Emma and Jenny. I believe you've done some work on the Closing the Gap Priority 4, which is obviously a really important thing in measuring how we are undertaking closing the gap activities to help Aboriginal people advance to achieve the same life standards that every other Australian has. So maybe some examples, or take us on a bit of a journey there with regard to how you've been able to use data to advance that cause.
Thank you. So I can tell you a little bit about what we're doing in New South Wales for Priority Reform 4 of Closing the Gap, which is really about Indigenous data sharing. So sharing data with Indigenous people, communities, organisations. So New South Wales has a 2-year, at this stage, joint work program between New South Wales Government and New South Wales Capo. It was established last year. And a key element of that is having this, what we're calling a data connector service. So within Department of Regional New South Wales and many other departments, there is now a role that's called a data connector, which is meant to be and is that one-stop shop for if requests come in, how do we help facilitate that data sharing with community. And I think the benefit of having that within the data function rather than perhaps within an Aboriginal outcomes function or another part of the organisation that focuses on closing the gap in all its elements is that we're building that into the BAU of how we're developing, for example, our data catalogue. So when we develop our data catalogue, we're thinking about, well, what's the metadata that we might want to know so that we can respond to requests that might come in under Priority Reform 4. So it's really about building that program of work, not as an add-on, not as something else, but as part of the core work that we're doing within our data strategy and our, building our data tools and technologies.
Thanks, Emma. Look, we're probably not as far down the track as New South Wales Government, and being fairly new to DUA. But I did want to just touch on a few things that we're putting in place, just some practical things to get us started. So we've been actively engaged with the framework of governance of Indigenous data, and actually working with the NIAA and other agencies on what that implementation plan looks like for whole of government. And I think for us, being involved in that from the beginning is really important because we're all buying into that. Having said that, we're not waiting. We're getting on with it right now because it's expected by every public servant to be engaged in closing the gap initiatives. So some of the things that we're working on, we're working on a DUA-specific plan on how to implement the GID, that's what we call it, the Governance of Indigenous Data. And we've already started doing some of those initiatives. We were doing the data asset inventory and, we worked with ONDC and we knew that there were, 26 metadata items, but we saw quite early on, if we added in at this time, collection of where our Indigenous data is held. That might be Indigenous people, Indigenous businesses or Indigenous location. That will give us insight to where our Indigenous data holdings are. So we've done that work. The next step for us is to go through and look at the assets, the data assets that don't have Indigenous in them and ask them why. Can we? And I think that's where we're going to make the biggest difference. Other simple initiatives, we've stood up a data governance committee, and in the terms of reference, we've specifically said that they have accountabilities and oversight for implementing Closing the Gap Priority Reform 4. So automatically we have that oversight committee to keep us on track and accountable. And the third initiative that we've stood up, which I'm really proud of, is that DUA has a Closing the Gap community of practice. It meets regularly. We have, Indigenous academia coming in and talking to us about their data and their research. And that community of practice has over 100 members within DUA. I think this is a really great initiative because it's about the cultural change, and everybody in the department has to take actions and steps towards closing the gap.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jenny and Emma, for those insights there, to making it practical, making it real. Some of the visionary things you've done too to think about more broadly, how do we make all data related to Indigenous Australians fundamentally important in how we close the gap. So thank you so much for those insights. We are now down to the last sort of 5 minutes. Wanted to make sure we had time for a couple of questions. We might take one from the audience and one from online, if that's okay. So we might start with an audience member. Does anyone have a question? Lady.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michaela from Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. What the hell am I doing here? Thank you. That was fantastic. I don't have a question, but for Ray, I've got an answer to your pithy tagline. I did go into ChatGPT. It's 4 words: slay your data game. There you go. It's what the kids are saying. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Wonderful.
That's mine.
Right.
We might just move to the online question now. Sorry, if you don't mind. Okay, so first we've got a question for Jenny. In your vision to being a disruptor over the next 12 months, how have you planned in disrupting the data world of DIWA? And have you got your eyes on best practice examples?
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is always the tricky bit of being on a panel, not anticipating. Look, I think DIWA's recruited a chief data officer for a reason. And if they were happy and everything was going along swimmingly, they wouldn't have recruited a chief data officer. I think the first 100 days was about building those relationships. You can't just come in and disrupt and throw everything up and go, I know best, because every organisation is different. So having those relationships. With the disruption, it's not going to be a dynamic, an avalanche of change. I think it'll be a continuous change. But what I will be doing is questioning, why do we do that? That's how it's always been done, but why? And I think when you question the why, it's actually challenging them to change, to improve, to adapt. So that's my thinking.
That's great, Jenny. Thank you. Good insights there. And just one last question from the online audience. Does the panel have any advice when encountering resistance within their organisation against data, digital AI and other technical advancements?
Okay.
You go. I think it will depend on what is driving the resistance. So there are, you could think of a dozen different reasons of what's driving resistance, from I don't have time, why does this matter to me, through to I don't know how to do this and I'm feeling really scared that this is now my responsibility, and I could come up with a dozen more. So it's thinking about what is the cause of the resistance, and then unfortunately it comes back to cultural change and behavioural change. We can't just tell people they need to do things. We have to set up the systems to make it easy for them to do it. We have to teach them how to do it, because you can't expect people to do things differently if they've never been taught how to do it. Then we have to communicate, repeat, make it real for people, as real as possible. How does this affect their particular part of the business? For us, it's about how do we enhance the delivery for the people and communities of regional New South Wales? So how do we think about how does that data, and for me it's all about geographic, 94 LGAs in regional New South Wales, I want everything on a geographically disaggregated way. So it's really about making it real. How will it make their lives better?
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. And we've only got 30 seconds left, so I wanted to take the time to thank the panel for their insights. It's been a fantastic opportunity to hear from CDOs across a range of different parts of public sector. So please join me in a round of applause for our wonderful panellists.